Oh, Moffat, now you're just making a mess. Alright, we have arrived at the end of Series 6, which means we are going to talk about the wedding of River Song. Yeah, a mess is kind of the best word for it. When I'm dealing with a Moffatt mess, I'm usually dealing with one of a couple things. Every now and then, I'm dealing with something that, at its core concept, is already a messy concept. And there are other times where some of the core ideas are okay, but just the execution is wonky. This one has a little bit of both. There are core concepts in here that work, but the fact that this was crammed into a single episode, this is nuts. Because the amount of stuff this episode is doing in terms of bringing us full circle around to the Doctor's death, this entire concept of time stopping and somehow happening all at once, yet at the same time unraveling, has to be introduced and be meaningful. We have to tie off the silence. We've got to cover what's going on with River. We need to cover the fact that the Doctor didn't actually die and how that happened and everything. Like, this thing is just, it moves at a breakneck pace because there's no way it couldn't with everything that it has to do. And it's one of those instances where some of the concepts I wish weren't in this and were done elsewhere where they could have room to breathe. The big one being the entire idea of all things are happening at once. For all intents and purposes, nothing's really done with that concept. And that's a really neat idea. And sort of the way it's visualized of like this overlapping of past, present, future all happening at once, and most people seem to think that that's just the world. That's a neat idea. But at the same time, it doesn't really impact the story all that much. I mean, River failing to kill the Doctor did need to throw things out of whack in some way, but I feel like that idea was bigger than just being the way time is messed up. I feel like that's an idea that was big enough that it should have been explored more fully than it is here. And speaking of River not shooting the Doctor, wow, that scene doesn't work at all. And it's just the drastic gear shift of it, because you've got the Doctor with River, the visor goes up, they have this very tearful exchange, she's like going, the suit's gonna make me kill you and I can't stop it, which, first of all, pause, hold on. If the suit is what is making her do it, then why do they need River? I'm a little bit confused on this entire thing at this point, because I guess conceptually I get the silence creating River so that they could basically fight fire with fire. Like, well, a Time Lord appears to be more or less unstoppable, let's make our own. But when she doesn't finish the job, why does it still need to be her then? Because I don't know. I mean, there's probably like some weird explanation, either a tossed off line that I missed or forgot, or in some extra thing, or I'm sure people have theories, but once she's no longer willing to kill him, I don't understand why it needs to be her, other than, like, if you're going to do the recursive loop argument of, like, well, she does and it's a fixed point, so it always has to be her. But set that aside for a second. I'm saying, why does the silence need to keep using her if they're going to have to force her by means of a suit that is in their control anyway? What is the value of it being her over literally anybody else? Or even just being the suit? I don't know. It's weird. But anyway, getting back to the scene, the gear shift doesn't work because it's this intense buildup to her getting ready to blast him, and then the blast happened, and he doesn't die, and he just looks at her, and she's just smiling like, huh? I'm like, what? No. So just the implication is one of two things. Either she was basically faking the trauma up to that point and then just dropped the act, which Look, River is certainly questionable at various points, but that's psychotic. That's emotional torture she's putting the Doctor through. That, and not like the fun and flirty way she kind of messes with him. Like, that's screwed up. So it's either that, or she just somehow miraculously wrestles control of the thing at the last minute, and yet somehow it's no big deal to her. That doesn't make any sense either. That shift doesn't work. If you're gonna make the decision that her failing to kill the Doctor is what breaks everything, fine, but like, it should have been, for the way the front half of that scene is built up, it should have been like a big, and she manages to expel the energy without getting him. Like, making it this casual thing just doesn't work at all. But then we get into the messed up timeline thing. We get a ton of characters back in, these little offhanded ways. We have Charles Dickens again. We have the Silurian scientist. We've got Winston Churchill. And that's kind of fun. It's, if we're going to do this, cool, fine. That's fine. Amy being badass commander with the eye patch, I do kind of like that. I kind of dig it. And the banter going on with her and Rory, I enjoyed. Once the Doctor is brought to River in this frozen timeline bit, their banter then, that I buy, that I get. And especially because once he touches her, like, things get serious, and she's not joking when things are being serious. Yeah. And I think there is some validity into exploring the idea of what happens trying to stop fixed points in time, since fixed points in time is a thing that's been tossed out by the show a few times up to this point. And the only time we've sort of messed with it a little was Waters of Mars. But even that, the Doctor was sort of riding a fine line of, well, technically things more or less still happen the same way, because the reason it was a fixed point in time and then he saved them was that Adelaide's granddaughter was supposed to be inspired by her death, and he just said, well, you just inspire her in real life. Of course, she still dies because she kills herself as a big middle finger to him. But, the Doctor was sort of getting off on a technicality in that one. He didn't just flat out stop the thing that was supposed to happen from happening. He just massaged it a bit, questionably, irresponsibly, but he didn't just straight up, no, that's not going to happen. So we haven't seen that before. That's an interesting enough idea to sort of explore. And like I said, if they wanted to do that and to further explore what is being done with time in this, then I wish they weren't also trying to tie off the Silence and Madame Kovarian and set up the next series. Because again, it's just too much. And as far as the Silence goes, I've reached a point. Well, actually, the issue isn't the well, it sort of is, because the Silence is technically the religious order. It's not strictly those beings, but let's be realistic. We all use it to mean them. Anyways, I have reached the conclusion that I don't like Madame Kovarian as a character. It's not that the performance is bad. She gives a perfectly good performance for what she's being asked to do. But what she's being asked to do is kind of dumb. And here's what I mean by that. Given that the stated goal of the Silence is to basically ensure that the universe doesn't come to an end because of the Doctor, while that does make them the functional antagonists from the Doctor's perspective, that's not an unreasonable goal to be trying to attain. So I'm annoyed that Madame Kovarian is such a mustache-twirling style villain, gleeful in the failure of others and the torment of people that she's fighting against. And what hit me about that in this episode is, given her goals and what she's trying to do, there is no reason for her to be as spiteful as she is, other than to make her as much of a straight-up villain as possible. I actually think it would have been way more interesting if she was more conflicted, if she was doing this because it's what had to be done and didn't appear to be taking any pleasure out of it. But watching this episode and thinking back at her appearances, she took glee in what she put the Doctor and Amy and Rory and River through. She really took joy in that. And there was no reason for that to be the case. And I actually think it's kind of boring that they did that, given that her intent could have been seen as misguided, but some variant of noble. And the thing is, the Cylons kind of get away with it, because you just look at them, they look weird and intimidating, but we don't actually have any personality off the Cylons. So while they are always scary, that's just a function of how they're designed and how they work within the story. With Madame Kovarian, we have the performance, we have the lines, and it's like, it's just villain to a degree that I actually find dull, and I don't think benefits anything going on, to be completely honest about it. So there's that. I do like Amy taking her out, though. I find that to be cathartic, and I also kind of like that Amy's implying, like, you weren't the only ones who gave River ruthlessness. She's my kid. She got some of it from me. So that was cool, and I dug that. The whole wedding thing, it's a really kind of a cheap fake out that we are led to believe that this is the time when River tells the Doctor, or I'm sorry, the Doctor tells River his name. I understand that he had to lie to Amy and Rory and say something that they would understand was something that they wouldn't have any business asking River, and that was just what he picked. So, like, functionally within the scene, I get it, but, like, metatextually, for us as an audience, that's a cheap fake out, and honestly, the Tesselecta in general is... the whole thing feels like it was reverse engineered. The more I think about the Tesselecta as a device at all, I think it was created to serve a plot function, as opposed to something that they thought would be neat and then figured out a way to use later in the plot, which would make it feel more organic. Instead, it really does feel like Moffat went, okay, I need a way for the Doctor to be in a location and to appear to die, and technically he's there because he needs to be. How could I do that? Well, put him in a basically indestructible suit that looks exactly like him, and then reverse engineer the Tesselecta out of that narrative necessity. But it just feels very mechanical. I mean, it is. It's a robot, but I mean narrative. It feels very mechanical in its use in the narrative. It doesn't feel particularly organic. And even looking back on its earlier appearance. Dorium, he was kind of fun, when he showed up. That worked well enough. The whole, especially now in hindsight, knowing what does or doesn't come of it, but the first question that must never be asked, Doctor Who, it really irritates me, especially paired with other stuff that goes on in the scene where we hear that. So the Doctor says, I've been too noisy, I need to retreat to the shadows. And I remember thinking at the time it aired, like, yes, thank you. He's been made too big and grand. Let's get him back to basics. And I thought that was what they were going to be setting up, except it's then like Doctor Who is like, I'm sorry, the first question, the question hidden in plain sight across all of time, and it's still going to end the universe. So even if he tries and retreats to the shadows, you're still basically making him the single most important thing in the universe, and I don't like that, and I never will. I don't. It's a case of the showing contradicting the telling. We are being told that the Doctor is going to make himself less important, and we're being shown through the story, and this dog is now coughing. Oh my God. But we are being shown through what we learn from Doctor, which I suppose is also a form of telling. Okay, fine, it's two tellings that's contradictory. But we're being told that, no, but the question of Doctor Who is somehow the greatest and oldest question in the universe. And it's like, oh, for God's sake. Those concepts don't gel at all. The performances are fine. Nobody gives a particularly bad performance in this. It's just the story is cramming so much stuff together that it's piling on top of each other. There's a lot of specific little somewhat nitpicky details that don't work for me. There's some of the big picture ideas don't work for me. And I will say I do genuinely like the moment they give with the Brigadier. And I like it for two reasons. First of all, I like the acknowledgement of the passing of the actor, I believe, Nicholas Courtney. And I also like that. I like having that be the moment that makes the Doctor decide to go and face his death. He then figures out a way to weasel out of it. But I like that that's the pivot moment, because I'm sure the Doctor had thought in his head, there always will be time. I can get to this. There's always going to be time. It's fine. And just a reminder that death comes for everybody, and time catches up with everybody. Sort of makes him realize, I could put this off, but what good is it gonna do? I like pivoting his decision to go and face his death on that moment. I think that works quite well. And I thought it was a small and little touching tribute. I did like that. But overall, the episode is just a mess. It's doing too much. The ideas are convoluted. Some of the ideas needed more room to breathe. Some of them didn't really need to be there at all. The stuff that's being set up for next series, I don't think is being set up well, and a lot of it doesn't even really feel like it factors in properly into the next series all that much. And it's just, it doesn't infuriate me the way Moffat at his worst can infuriate me. And I'll have to figure this out. I'm going to have a really hard time deciding whether to rank this or Let's Kill Hitler one above the other. I have a feeling they're going to be close. Because I have similar issues with both of them in that, there's good bits, good moments, sound ideas, but execution, especially on the writing level, it's just jumbled. There's too much happening. And if it was a two-parter, maybe it would have the room to breathe and have the shifts in the emotional beats work, as opposed to turning on a dime at some of the points that it does. Hey, it's definitely one of the weaker series finales for modern era Doctor Who. And that's The Wedding of River Song. What are your thoughts on it? You rewatched it lately? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. There's a bunch of stuff to do as well, because you can support me on Patreon. That's really appreciated. Link in the description. Plus, the like, the subscribe. All those things are great. There's other links to other stuff besides, but you don't have to click on any of it. I definitely appreciate it, but end of the day, folks, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned.